We can't replace all the products on our shelves with local produce. It's not possible.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Red Dot Hot Takes. My name is Hossan Leong and today we're going to tackle another hot topic. With me as some guests, let's say hi first of all to Joline Tang, founder of the Sustainability Project, which is a sustainability startup. What exactly do you do? Tell us.
Okay, hi, my name is Joline. You can call me Jo for short. My company does quite a lot of different things, but essentially we're just trying to encourage people to take steps to, make the planet a better place to live in. So we do sustainability workshops, we conduct talks, we do educational programs. We also have initiatives whereby we give used packaging a second life. And then we also have a retail arm where we sell zero waste products. So we do a lot of things here and there, but it's really just to encourage people to take a small step for a better planet.
Wow, very good. Busy, huh?
Yes. Very busy, yeah.
All right, thanks for being with us this episode. Now, next up, we also have Darren Tan, who is also, your title very long, Head of Education and Community Outreach at ComCrop, Singapore's very own rooftop urban farming pioneer. You are one of the first, so tell us more about it.
Right, so my name is Darren and I head the education and outreach efforts at ComCrop. So ComCrop is a local farm. We are a production farm, except that we look at turning underutilized spaces into productive land. So our current site, which is also one of the larger sites that we have, is on the rooftop of a building, of a food processing building. Yeah.
Where is that?
Woodlands.
Oh, Woodlands, okay. Yeah.
So in my role, what I do is talk about sustainability and food security and the issues with food production, and I share that with schools, I share that with corporates, and we also work with disadvantaged groups to see whether there are possibilities to then provide meaningful employment on the farm.
Fantastic. Wow, well done.
Thank you.
And our third guest for this episode, we have our Minister for Sustainability and Environment, Mr. Grace Fu. You're here, of course, to talk about one of the 6 pillars of the Forward SG exercise. Now, perhaps, shall we test everyone and see whether they know the pillars or not?
Why not?
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Name one pillar.
I think there's one called Empower.
Empower, Joe?
Steward.
Yeah, which is
Equipped.
Equipped, there's care. Build,
unite.
And unite. 6 pillars. So maybe let's start with Minister Grace, and we'll talk a bit about why is sustainability under the Steward pillar?
Yeah, it's really about how do we continue to live on this planet in a sustainable way so that we do not extract more than we should and leave nothing for the next generation. There are already signs that we are having a negative impact on the world. So it's about stewarding our environmental resources for the future good of Singapore and Singaporeans.
Right.
So we discuss things like, what is the trade-off? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it environment? Where do we find the right balance?
We'll go into that in just a while, because right now we have to go into our hot take, our first hot take for today. Sustainability is a first world problem. It should not come at the expense of economic growth. All right? Because people will say, like I said earlier, I need to survive. Sustainability is right at the back of my mind. I can't afford to pay extra for sustainable things and products. So how true is that?
A lot of public education is required. First of all, understanding the impact of our economic activities as it is today on the climate. So I think we have been getting some help from the weather lately. People are suddenly realizing that, rain shouldn't be and a lot longer. And you can see that there's massive floods. It's happening now.
Yeah.
Right? Talk about UK having wine industry coming up.
Yeah.
Because the weather is just changing, and think about the impact on agriculture and downstream, right? So people need to realize that if we continue at the present pathway, this economic activity that we're used to talking about, thinking about, is actually not going to be there.
I think it's a very important topic and conversation to have. What are your thoughts, Darren?
Well, I think, as what Minister has said, there are multiple ways to look at sustainability, and I think carbon pricing is one of the ways that they are trying to sort of reflect the impact that it has on the environment. So it's important to also recognize that carbon tax is just one way to measure it. There are many other different impacts that an organization or a certain industry has on the environment. So getting people to understand that holistic picture is very, very important.
So Joe, how is that in your line of work? How much difficulty are you facing trying to, get into these SMEs and what's the success rate like for you?
Okay, I think you're quite fortunate in the sense that most SMEs who come to us already want to commit a bit more into sustainability. But I think for myself, it's more about educating the public that we face a bit more of an issue, because most of the time they think that sustainability is quite expensive. Maybe because of how it is being portrayed, whereby when you're sustainable, you use reusables, right? But actually it's from the very start whereby you try to reduce your use before you buy something new. We're just trying to tell them that it's a trade-off. When you're spending your money on certain things, you're actually really investing in the future, right? If you're buying organic, there might be certain chemicals that they're not using that will affect the future. You can't really see it now. So it's a bit intangible. People don't really understand sometimes. So we spend quite a bit of effort telling them, what are the steps you need to take.
Okay, now I want to go to this topic of greenwashing. Sustainability is a big word, sustainable. Everybody's talking about it. It's the buzzword. But are companies taking advantage of it and going like, do we do this whole greenwashing thing? What are your thoughts, Minister?
I like to think that most of the companies are not doing this intentionally because the standards are not very clear right now, because we're talking about many different types of products and many different countries with their own national context. The context of Singapore is quite different from, say, a country like Norway, because a lot of things here are imported, right? So the calculation for carbon footprint is actually quite different. But there are small numbers who are intentionally taking advantage of this green labeling and actually not, in essence, making that change. So for these companies, my view is that it's much better for them to be green labeled and then to be watched and supervised by the people around, the public around it, than to say, I'm not even signing up. Signing up, I think, is the first step. And then once they signed up, they will find that actually there are enough people watching them, and that's too much ethical and reputational loss if they say something and not
and they
do
don't
something.
do it. Yeah.
I mean, I do agree. There are companies that come to us and then they say, oh, I'm in this particular industry and I want to go green, so can I build a farm? And I'm like, that's not exactly how you go green, right? And
Because green farm,
so
green,
they think vegetables and straight away it becomes green, but it's not like that. So I have to have a longer conversation with them and say, look, it's okay to want a farm. It's okay to say you want to grow vegetables for your staff and things like that. I mean, there is some inherent benefit to that, right? Because maybe if their staff grow the vegetables, then they appreciate the local produce a little bit more, so that helps. But there's also a bigger conversation that we need to have about, like, what are you actually doing? What's your core business, right? So if your core business is on one end doing a lot of pollution and then you just have a farm and you think that helps to offset, then I think that's the wrong way to go. Yeah, that's the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah.
You were talking about local produce. We're going to go to our next hot take. Local produce is expensive. Doesn't have as much variety as imported ones. All right. So people are going, I want to eat my apricots and peaches and stuff like that from overseas. Why can't we just eat rambutans and chikus? Right? So because Darren, you're an urban farmer. So how are we going to convince, Singaporeans and people who live in Singapore that, hey, actually, let's buy local. Yes, it might cost a bit more, but there is an advantage to that.
Yeah, so I think there are many, many parts of this topic that have a lot of things to be talked about. And it's inevitable that local produce is definitely a little bit more expensive when you compare with our neighbors, right? Because they have cheap land, they have the benefit of lower living costs, whereas in Singapore, rental is expensive, labor is expensive. And we also want to give Singaporeans the right wages. You don't want to underpay them, right? So because of that, it's expensive in Singapore, but also with the growing of farms, I think in the last 10 years or so, the number of farms in the industry has increased quite a lot. I think as the farms continue to grow and they become better at what they do, the number of varieties will increase. and the prices should be able to come down. And I think what people have quickly forgotten is that just 2-3 years ago when COVID hit, there was a point where we struggled to get some vegetables on the shelves,
The supply chain.
right? And it was a lot of dependence on local farms like us that we then harvested ahead of time, and we made sure that Singaporeans continued to eat, although there was less variety, but we still had. Right, so that I think that's also something that we need to think about. And what Joe said about like food resilience, the ability to say, okay, today I don't have cai xin, can I eat bai cai tomorrow? Right? Or if I eat kangkong 5 days a week, will I get bored? Or can I find different ways to cook kangkong?
But actually, from a ministry point of view, right, we can't replace all the products on our shelves
No,
with
of
local
course
produce.
not.
It's not possible.
Especially because of the climate and where we are.
It's because of
at.
climate and also because of cost.
Yeah.
And what we really want is 30 by 30.
What does that mean? I want
It
to
means
find
that we
out.
have the ability or capability to produce 30% of our nutrition needs by 2030, and that's like 6 years, 7 years ahead, right? What does it mean? It's really having the capability so that if we have major disruptions in future, hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, we have the ability to turn on the scale because the farmers have accumulated technology, right? But that's really to ensure that we have some basic vegetables, leafy vegetables, basic fish proteins and eggs to keep us going. It's not to replace every item on the shelf with local produce.
At the end of the day, right, Joe, you are a sustainability influencer.
Oh no, I wouldn't call it
You wouldn't
that.
No.
Yeah.
But then what is your... How are you going to convince people to live this green lifestyle? Fast fashion, everything you just order online, it comes, and then you don't want it, you dump it. How are we going to educate people that, what can we do about this?
One thing we try to share with like our followers is this thing called conscious consumption. So they really need to reflect a lot more on the intention when you want to buy something, whether it's a either or, which one do you want to choose, which alternative might be better. Because at the end of the day, when you take a step, right, it will impact the environment, right? So it's the trade-offs.
How are we going to educate the public to move forward to say that, can you just be content with what you have, Darren?
I feel like maybe we've been too successful in importing all these different different countries have been so successful at exporting. But we also need to, at the back of our minds, I suppose, think about what this means for every time we buy, right? When I buy a produce from all the way from the United States, for example, right? What is the associated cost with that? Not just about the dollar value, but traveling, the storage and stuff like that.
Cargo and food.
Yeah. So I would like to see, people have a bit more flexibility in that sense, be able to say, okay, today I don't have this, I'll eat something else, and experiment around. Because I think, I don't know, there might be one day where we have to eat crickets and stuff, then I'm stealing myself up for it, but that may be a case, I don't know.
Have you tried, Minister? Crickets?
No.
Not even the ground out
Not
ones.
yet. But I would use the word incremental.
Right.
We can't expect people to totally go meat-free. If we say that, MSC say that now we should all go without red meat, I think I will lose my job. Right? Yeah. But if you say incremental, 1 meal a week, right? Reduce. So do incrementally.
We're going to go into our next hot take, recycling, because where we're going to put all the stuff that we want to throw away. It's difficult to do, and it's not easy to separate our waste. And that's true though, because this is my own experience when I was living in Australia or even in Europe. I always forget to bring my shopping bag because we're so used to getting it from the supermarkets, right? Or the shops or the kopitiam. And then you end up paying 99 cents for another recycling bag from Woolies. So we want to talk a bit about that here in Singapore. We are starting to do something about it.
Yes.
Can we not just say, okay, no more, tomorrow, no more plastic bag, you all bring one back? Please, can we do that?
Yeah, so actually our position on plastic is a nuanced one because in many places, they do not have a good or effective waste collection and management system. What do I mean by that? You find many countries just landfilling their waste. In other words, just straight directly from the green bin onto a landfill.
Yes.
And so you have really plastic sitting there for hundreds of years, not disintegrating in any time soon, right? And what happens when you have heavy rain it gets washed into your
Into the
river
sea,
system, it gets into the sea. So you have this whole problem, which is a real enormous problem with marine litter all over the world. But in Singapore, we collect our waste. We have rubbish chutes, we have, the rubbish trucks, and then we either recycle or incinerate. We don't have direct landfilling. So for us, it's not really practical to ban plastic bags. Plastics are used in many, many things. For example, we use it to bag our rubbish before we throw it into the rubbish chutes. It's used for masks, it's used for PPE. So it's really not about banning plastics, but really how do you collect it and treat it properly? And most importantly is to reduce the waste.
For recycling itself, it's actually a breakdown of an object into its pure form. So for plastic, you'll break it down and you're trying to use those to make it into something new. So if you're using biodegradable, it causes the quality to degrade over time. Yeah, so it will affect it. Yeah, and it's not so optimal in that sense.
See, their marketing work.
No, in some countries, this is the better option.
Okay.
In some countries, because their option is actually not incineration. They're just out in the...
Yeah. Then speaking of landfill, Pulau Semakau, that's your pet subject. Joe?
Yeah. So Semakau landfill, we actually went pre-COVID to visit the island, and we do bring people down to see, the amount of space left. So we do sharings as well with let's say schools and all that. And I think recently one of the schools that we brought them there, the students did ask, can we just build another landfill? If I'm not wrong, it took a few billion to build Semakau landfill.
So it is costly because we treat Semakau. Semakau actually is a different landfill from what we've described earlier. Basically, after incineration, the ashes, we still need a place, a home for the ashes. So by incinerating it, we have already complexed the volume down to maybe 5% of its original volume. But that 5% still needs to be treated, still need to find a home.
Somewhere, yeah.
And Semakau landfill is for that, the incineration ash. Right. But for incineration, as obviously there's environmental impact because, God knows what have gone in. It is organic, it is metal, it is heavy metal. And if you just put that directly into the sea, it's going to pollute the sea, it's going to kill all the marine lives there. So we actually built a proper bathtub, if you like, boundary with impermeable kind of barrier, almost like a huge sheet of, barrier to keep the ash, in the middle of the sea. So you can imagine that it's, first of all, it takes up space in the marine space that we have, and also it's costly. And we really do not have sufficient space for litter. If we have space, we want that for many other things.
Of course.
For farming, for example, for your barumundi, or the lights. We want it for recreation. We want it for, wildlife to grow. So how can we avoid sort of dedicating another huge space in our very limited area for waste? I mean, you think about it, right? It's really just space for waste.
What are your thoughts, Darren, on recycling and because you see, because you're talking about farming, right? There'll be waste.
Yeah.
What do you do with this waste?
With farming, with agriculture, a lot of waste actually comes from the cosmetic filtering. Because then people will say I don't want to buy vegetables that have an insect bite on it, right? Even though, sometimes people will say that actually if you have an insect bite, it means that if the insects are willing to eat it, then it should be safe.
It's like
for
durians, right? Durians with worms taste
better. So that's the interesting thing where if you apply it a certain way, some people will see it that way, and then when it applies to something else, then they see it a different way. So that's useful to think about. But definitely, so for example, even the stems and the roots of our plants, we try to then educate the public on what to do with it. So we actually ship out our vegetables together with the roots and the growing medium. Because, in most farms, they will just cut it off. If it's in the soil, they just leave it in the soil. But if it's other hydroponics one, they usually cut it off and they pack it in. But we leave it there because one, it keeps the vegetables a little bit alive for a little bit longer. But more importantly, then they can use that, break it up and use it as soil or
and compost.
And compost. And it's actually very, very good because it's got all the nutrients, it's got the roots and stuff
Have you
like
seen
that.
ComCrop? In the whole plant. The vegetables come in the whole plant with the roots as well.
Yeah, and then we break it up.
Keeps in the fridge much better.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now the problem with Singapore, because of less scarcity of land and all that. Now what kind of produce are we actually growing for our viewers? So we have vegetables, we got fish, we got eggs. What else?
Yeah, those mainly are the main
things, right?
categories, because
Meats we don't really have,
meat, if you go into say poultry and all that, it takes up a lot of space and a lot of energy. But we are going to expand the variety on vegetables. So we're going to go to fruited vegetables.
Oh, good.
So maybe tomatoes, maybe
Okay.
cucumbers. We're going to say the fungi family, the mushrooms as well. Yeah, so basically it's just to build up the
Such a
skill sets.
variety.
But there's a lot that our farmers can do, because they can increase variety, they can make it more efficient. So actually I think ComCrop and all the other farmers are working every day, every harvest, how to produce more
Good.
with less inputs,
Right.
less,
Trying to be as
diseases.
efficient as possible, and as clean as possible.
Fantastic. You know what? We've got this little bin
Yes.
that we want to introduce to homes,
Yes.
Minister. Let us explain how this, where does this come from, and how do
Yeah.
we collect this? And
From my own experience is that my son just took a broken water pail.
That's exactly
And
what
put
I
it-
did as well.
and just put it in a corner
Yeah.
and say, this is where the recyclables
Yes,
will go
yes.
to.
wow, okay.
Because we didn't have one. But ever since my son put that broken water pail in a corner, it just reminded us that, hey, actually, before I throw it into a bin, I can actually just separate. And our volume of recyclables have actually gone up quite significantly. And also because we are trying to sort upstream so that there's less contamination. So you can put your bottles, paper, or a portion, and use a portion for e-waste, for example, so that you can actually do some sorting.
And it's got a QR code as well, where you can actually, if you're not sure, this just like advertisement, but this is very useful. So I want to talk about it, because you can actually scan the QR code and it tells you what you can and cannot put into this bin. So it's a really good idea, this one. So I think people can collect this at community centers
Yes.
and clubs and stuff like
Yes,
that.
so we're going to distribute it nationwide, so every household can have one.
Okay, so I think it's great because it's about education, and I think, like I said earlier, in other countries, people are used to separating their wastes.
Yeah.
I think here we're still in the process of going, I just put everything into the rubbish chute lah, wrap, throw,
And it's
boom,
convenient.
done, gone,
Yeah.
right? So that's a really good initiative. So I think let's kind of conclude and give us your thoughts about where we are at the moment, and what do you think our future is going to be like? Because I mean, future generations are going to go, like you said earlier, Minister, thank you, uncle, auntie, grandfather, grandmother, for taking care of us so that now we have a life, Positive?
Yeah, I think on the whole it's positive, because I'm starting to see that people are definitely being more conscious about their habits, and they're trying to learn more. And I highly encourage everyone else to, just continue this education process, because it's important to understand the unique context that Singapore is in. We do things a little bit differently, but that's because we are also built a little bit differently. And I think that's our selling point in a sense. So as long as we keep the conversations up and we don't alienate, people who are trying, if you don't bring your own cup or something, then don't make them feel so bad.
Judgy.
Don't be so judgy. Sometimes it happens, right? But
Yeah.
but small steps, like what Minister said, right? Small steps and incremental, I think that gets us there. And of course, being a bit more robust and more food resilient, supporting the local industries, that's something very important as well.
Okay. Joe, what are your thoughts?
So I'm looking forward to, schools having more education in sustainability, like the primary and secondary school, because we see them being a lot more interested, but maybe there's not enough providers to share with them more information. Yeah. And as a whole, I think a step is better than no step. So I'm positive. I'm really hoping that the future generation and even the current generation, they'll all do whatever they can to be a little bit more sustainable. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Minister, zero waste. Then buffets how?
Well, I think that we can, as I say, it's really not about going cold turkey, right? But it's about how do we collectively say that maybe buffet should be kept to, say, very special occasions, and maybe the hotel will then take the cue that actually buffet is not so well demanded, and therefore it will reduce the frequency. So it's really about moving incrementally and sending, as a consumer, sending a message to the businesses. But at the same time, we're also not going to just live without a plan B. So we're doing adaptation. Things like the local produce, things like water resilience, things like coastal protection. It's about us agreeing as one generation what we should do for the next.
Thank you so much, all my guests today, Darren,
Thank you.
Mr. Grace, and Joe, for having this robust discussion about sustainability. I think it's really important that we actually go forward with these initiatives that the government is putting forward. So on that note, thank you for joining us on this episode. If you have any comments or questions, you can always leave them at the link at the comment section below. And on that note, we're going to see you next time for the other pillars that we're going to talk about. See ya.